A Halloween nightmare come to life as the Blackhawks lose to the Sharks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, just a reminder off the top to please go and hit that like button, comment down below as to your reaction to the Blackhawks loss to the Sharks last night. And most importantly, subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Thank you very much. Also got to let you know real quick that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Go and visit FanDuel.com, and if you're not already a member, you'll have a chance to win $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet cashes with America's #1 sportsbook. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Hope everyone's November is off to a lovely start. That feels weird to say. Can't believe it's already November, and I can't believe the Blackhawks lost to the Sharks. 3-2 loss for the Blackhawks in San Jose last night. To everyone who also stayed up late to see that outcome, I'm right there with you, as the Blackhawks were unable to carry over that momentum that they generated on Monday and win a second consecutive game for the first time this year. Been a problem of theirs for far too long, not able to string consecutive victories together, and wound up being a real frustrating loss. As frustrated as I've been all season long, and it was frustrating for multiple different reasons. One, as I just mentioned, the Blackhawks played a pretty good game on Monday in Colorado against a team that had started to get, clicking on and rolling on the right cylinders. Colorado had won 4 games in a row, I believe, or 5 games in a row, it might have even been. Going into that one, the Blackhawks with a strong third period to shut it down and come out with 2 points. Unable to build off of that against San Jose. 2, San Jose was a team that they had already beaten pretty handedly this year. A game in which the home opener for the Hawks never really felt like it was in jeopardy. The Sharks never really challenged them all that much. 3, Macklin Celebrini, the #1 overall pick in the 2024 NHL Draft, was out of the lineup once again. 4, we're talking about the San Jose Sharks here. Sure, maybe they had won 2 consecutive games, but still 2-7-2 through their opening 11. 5, the Hawks were the fresher of the 2 teams, as I outlined in my preview episode. A reminder, I'll have a preview coming out for every Blackhawks regular season game, and stay tuned until segment 3 of today's show, as I'll be going over a preview of tomorrow afternoon's matchup with the Los Angeles Kings. But the Hawks were the fresher of the 2 teams. The Sharks, that was their 4th game in the last 6 days, for the Hawks. It was just their 2nd in the past 5. And 6, I hate to be that guy, but the Blackhawks probably deserved a better fate because they did a lot of good things in this game. It honestly felt eerily similar to the contest the Hawks had against the Buffalo Sabres earlier on in the year, aside from them falling behind 2-0. They did fall behind 1-0 in this one, but I thought they had a really good response late in the first period to go and grab their first lead of the game. 2 goals from Ryan Donato, who stays red hot. Tyler Bertuzzi with his first 5-on-5 goal and point of the season. Felt like the Blackhawks had a chance to capitalize on that the rest of the way. They didn't, coming out of the gate in the second period, as I'll touch on here more in just a moment. But they had a good finish to the second period to set them up for probably their most dominant period of the year in the third. But the Sharks, Mackenzie Blackwood, able to hang on in the final frame despite the Hawks' late push, and Hawks wind up coming out on the wrong end of the final outcome in a game they really, really needed, not only to help get that record closer to 500, but to also just avoid all the noise that comes with losing to a team like the San Jose Sharks. Very, very frustrating. I know Blackhawks fans are upset to see this Hawks team lose to a Sharks team like this. And even though they did a lot of good things, it's still an unacceptable final outcome. However, it was just a really weird game, and that's why I kind of talked about how it related to that game against Buffalo earlier on in the year, because the Sharks had some good looks. They led 24-18 in shots on goal through 40 minutes, but how they scored their 3 goals were odd. It's not like the Blackhawks were giving up scoring chance after scoring chance or allowing odd man rushes left and right. No, their defense was not at its best maybe, but it wasn't horrendous or anything. 2 goals come from the 19-year-old Will Smith, which really hurts, by the way, because some of you probably remember my preview episode from the first meeting between the Blackhawks and Sharks, and I was lucky enough to be in attendance for the Hawks home opener, and on the show, I mentioned I took Will Smith anytime goal scorer in hopes that I was going to see his first NHL goal. Of course, it happens in the second meeting when I didn't bet on Will Smith, and he scores 2 goals. Both of them, though, were absolute beauties, and boy, can this kid fire the biscuit, but both of them were like harmless-looking plays. The first one, TJ Brody caught letting Will Smith have a little bit too much space. The second was kind of a nothing-burger-looking play, and then the third goal that San Jose scored came on a weird poke-in from Alex Wenberg. So it wasn't due to like true defensive breakdowns from the Blackhawks or anything, and it was honestly kind of an unfortunate night for Peter Mrazek to have a subpar game. But as far as what truly went wrong for the Blackhawks, I got 3 things that truly went wrong for the Blackhawks that cost them this game. The first was the poor start to the second period. I mentioned goals from Ryan Donato and Tyler Bertuzzi late in the first to put them ahead 2-1 after 20 minutes. The Hawks really had a chance out of the gate in that second period to take control of the game, and not only did they not do that, but they gave up 2 goals to San Jose to give them the lead. They squandered their lone power play chance while San Jose capitalized on their lone opportunity, and they really didn't generate that many dangerous looks until the final few minutes. So the second period, really costly for the Blackhawks, and I think this just shows it doesn't matter who it's against. The Blackhawks just don't have the luxury of taking their foot off the gas throughout the course of a 60-minute game, because if they do for any significant period of time, they jeopardize coming away with 2 points. What also killed the Blackhawks was that they got no production from Connor Bedard and Teuvo Teravainen, both of which completely dominated the game in the first meeting. 2 assists from Bedard, 2 assists from Teravainen. Both wound up staying off of the stat sheet, even though they certainly had their opportunities. Bedard had 3 shots on goal. Teravainen had 5. Seth Jones also had probably the best chances of anyone in that third period, which felt like a 20-minute power play for the Blackhawks. Not sure how Seth Jones didn't score in that final frame. Not sure how the Blackhawks didn't either, but for Connor Bedard to get outshined by Will Smith. Look, I give the kid a lot of slack because the underlying analytics when he's on the ice versus when he's off the ice, the amount of scoring chances that he's getting, it feels like the dam is going to break eventually. And there was a lot of good puck movement between he and Teravainen and Philip Kurashev, who is up on the top line for the second consecutive game as well. But at the end of the day, we're in a production business here. Wins and losses, goals, points, and Bedard didn't wind up on the stat sheet last night, while Will Smith wound up being the game breaker for San Jose. So that's certainly disappointing. And then also what went wrong for the Hawks, Mackenzie Blackwood just chose a real unideal time for them to absolutely stand on his head. He stopped all 11 shots that the Blackhawks fired on cage in the third period and the final 20 shots that he faced in the latter 2 periods of this game. The Blackhawks had 19 scoring chances in the third period alone, including 8 high danger chances. None of them found their way into the back of the net. That's why I say, even though they dug themselves that 3-2 hole, they probably deserve better. They let in all the analytics. They let in the deserve to win a meter. But again, it's a production business, and the Blackhawks couldn't solve Mackenzie Blackwood when it mattered, and the Sharks were able to best Peter Mrazek a couple of times there in the second period. All right, there are my quick takeaways from the Blackhawks. Super disappointing 3-2 loss on Halloween night in San Jose. Coming up in just a moment, I'll take a look back at my 3 keys to victory that I laid out, and I'll also touch on the Hawks now being at the bottom of the NHL standings. But first, real quick, I do got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle all the NFL action going on this year with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 worth of bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app now gives you everything that you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place, so that when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can go and check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you also happen to place your bets. And I know the Blackhawks are coming off of an uber disappointing loss to San Jose, but they just bested the Colorado Avalanche on Monday in a game no one expected them to win. I don't think anyone really expects them to win tomorrow in Los Angeles. Kind of sounds like the perfect time to lay a wager down on our Blackhawks. If you're feeling that vibe, be sure to go and check out FanDuel.com. And if you're not already a member, you'll have a chance to win $150 worth of bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. So again, be sure to go and sign up with FanDuel by going and visiting FanDuel.com to have a chance to win $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, just want to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen. Now, for your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast so that you can become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. So go and check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey right now for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. You can also find it on YouTube. Looking back at my 3 keys to victory, as I do in every recap episode, my first key to victory that I laid out for the Blackhawks was to sustain long shifts in the offensive zone, because I thought if they could bank on that early, it would really pay dividends for them late, with them being the fresher team. The Sharks' 4th game in 6 days, some travel involved in there as well. I didn't think it was going to be an easy back half of that game for them. Unfortunately, that's really when the Blackhawks sustained all of their offensive zone time, was in that third period. They just didn't do enough of it in the opening 20 minutes. There were blips, there were nice segments, but most of it came in the final 5, 6, 7 minutes of those 2 periods. They just didn't get off to good enough starts. So didn't really get to put that in the bank and go and reap the benefits of it later like they wanted to. You know, they got enough quality looks off in the third period to not only tie that game, but to probably win it as well. And it really felt like one where if the game had just gotten into overtime, the Blackhawks were going to have all the momentum and they were coming away with 2 points. But all you can really do is tip your cap on the San Jose Sharks for holding it down when it mattered. But yeah, the Blackhawks certainly didn't get enough offensive zone time in the first 2 periods. As I referenced earlier, San Jose led 24-18 in shots on goal through 2 periods, and the scoring chances, shot attempts in terms of the deeper analytics were all pretty even. And that's disappointing considering how well the first matchup went for the Blackhawks. My second key to victory was for Bedard and Teravainen to take over, and they just didn't. They had their opportunities, but again, it's about getting the puck in the back of the net. Will Smith was the one to do it. So it was his night, not Connor Bedard's. And when that happens, when Connor Bedard gets outshined by another player, odds are the Blackhawks probably aren't going to win because they just lack enough offensive firepower. I think that's abundantly clear through their opening 11 games. My third key to victory was to shut down the Sharks' top line. And while that trio didn't wind up on the stat sheet, they were absolutely dominant at even strength every time they were out there on the ice, mostly up against the Wyatt Kaiser and Seth Jones duo, who really didn't have that strong of analytics. Alex Vlasic and Connor Murphy were really strong. Got to give a shout out to Connor Murphy, because ever since I called him out on the podcast, he's been playing really nicely. I think he's +5 over the last 2 games, had another pair of assists, picked up apples on both of the Blackhawks goals. So love to see him have that kind of game, but the Kaiser and Jones duo didn't have much success against the Sharks' top line. Analytics were heavily in their favor as they led 24-12 in shot attempts, 16-6 in shots on goal, 10-3 in scoring chances, and 7-0 in high danger chances when they were on the ice. And that was part of the Blackhawks also not having enough sustained offensive zone time. The heavy hitters for the Sharks, when they were on the ice, they were mostly in the Blackhawks' end. The one thing that did go right last night was that I cashed the Ryan Donato anytime goal scorer ticket, baby. At least came out of that crappy late night Halloween loss with a little bit of cash. I hope some folks out there tailed me on the Ryan Donato anytime goal scorer. And despite a little bit of a struggling start to the year with the Locked On Blackhawks plays, courtesy of the fine folks over at FanDuel, that now has us in the plus money for the year. Unfortunately, Hawks minus 1.5 didn't cash, but getting Donato at plus 430 anytime goal score was very nice. Hopefully we can keep that mojo rolling here on the show. Final few takeaways that I have to get into before I move into segment 3 and talk about the Blackhawks matchup tomorrow afternoon with the Los Angeles Kings. With this loss to San Jose, unfortunately, Blackhawks fans, the Hawks are now at the bottom of the NHL standings once again, 3-7-1 through their opening 11 contests. Only 7 points has them all the way at the bottom. I will say, I think this team deserves better than that with the way they played, right? Like, they've not been getting blown out. They've been playing pretty solid, close contested games. They're just finding ways to lose them right now, and that's really, really frustrating. But the biggest takeaway that I have from the Blackhawks being at the bottom of the standings with the way that they've played is, man, they're just, not getting enough from the offensive firepower that they do have, and the offensive firepower that they do have just certainly still isn't enough. And somehow the Blackhawks are worse off through 11 games than they were last year. I think that's all going to come back to earth. I think there's going to be some leveling out of the curve at some point here. You would like to think, but who knows? It's a very weird game. But see the Blackhawks at the bottom of the standings, considering, they wanted to take a step in the right direction, considering the offseason additions. And I know there will be some people in the comment sections disputing over what I mean by taking a leap. As I outlined many times leading into the start of this year, I wasn't talking about a significant leap. I expected the Blackhawks to be nowhere in playoff contention. I, again, had them going under 74.5 points that FanDuel listed to open up this year. I just thought that with the pieces they have, considering what they did last year, the offense would be a little better than what it is. The defense, for the most part, has been fine, and I think once they get Alec Martinez back, that is certainly going to help, and they are going to be a scrappier bunch this year because they play better defense. They're going to be in more games, but what's really killing them is they're just lacking offensive firepower, and that kind of leads to Connor Bedard and Teuvo Teravainen. Those guys just need to do more. I give a lot of props to Ryan Donato for leading this Blackhawks team with 6 goals, but for him to have double what Bedard and Teravainen have and as many as they have combined, I mean, that's just absolutely not good enough. And Teravainen now has gone without a point in 6 consecutive games. Absolutely not good enough for what he's getting paid and, the opportunity that he's getting here inside the top 6, right? Like, he needs to be better. And Connor Bedard, despite him having good analytics, the scoring chances are there. The opportunities, right? I keep mentioning it feels like the dam is going to break. It's got to happen now, man. With the shot that he has, it's certainly disappointing that he only has 3 goals. I'm not going to knock on the kid because he's still this team's leading scorer, and there are much bigger issues that the Blackhawks have than what Connor Bedard is doing. He is going to be fine. The puck movement was there last night, but again, it's a production league, and Connor Bedard needs to get the finished product more frequently, especially on the power play. No power play goals through 11 games is unacceptable out of number 98. The last takeaway that I have before going into segment 3 is the Blackhawks need to get going right here, right now. It's not going to get any easier on the schedule if you go and look at things now that the calendar flips over to November. We're only 11 games into the year, so again, we got to hold our horses a little bit, and I think everything's going to level out here as the games continue. But it's not an easy schedule that the Hawks have until Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving is kind of that time that hockey fans talk about and you hear NHL players talk about. Once you hit the Thanksgiving break, that's kind of when you know exactly what your team is, when you kind of have a good fingerprint on whether you're going to be a playoff contender, whether you're kind of looking like you're going to be on the outside looking in. If you need to go and grab a piece, that's probably when you have a good idea of what you need to address on your team and whatnot. Thanksgiving is kind of a date that every NHL team has circled. And here are the Hawks matchups before Thanksgiving later on this month. They're in Los Angeles tomorrow, obviously. In the front end of their back-to-back, they'll be playing Anaheim to conclude their 5-game road trip. Then they'll come back home to take on the Detroit Red Wings as Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat come to town. Then they'll be taking on the Dallas Stars. Excuse me. That is a back end of the back-to-back with Detroit, so that's no easy feat for the Blackhawks. Going up against one of the better teams in the Western Conference in their own building. Then they'll return home to take on the Minnesota Wild, who are off to a good start. Then they go out west to play Seattle and Vancouver, two not easy games. They will return home to play Anaheim, but then they'll play the Florida Panthers the next night. Then they go to Philadelphia, which is a building they've struggled in immensely outside of Game 6 of the 2010 Stanley Cup Final for the last 25 to 30 years. And the last game they have before Thanksgiving is on Black Wednesday at home against the Dallas Stars. So, against Anaheim, maybe in Philadelphia, at Seattle, at Anaheim this weekend. But, you can't really give the Blackhawks any gimmies with their record being the last team in the standings and the way they've gone about things. If they're going to win games, it's, going to be a grind from start to finish. So Blackhawks got to buckle up, and us fans could too. We're going to see what's going to transpire here up until Thanksgiving, but the schedule certainly doesn't seem like it's going to be any easier for the Blackhawks. But there's everything that I have that I wanted to get off my chest from last night's game in San Jose. Before I wrap up today's episode, stay tuned because I'll let you know about everything that you're going to want to know before the puck drops tomorrow afternoon in Los Angeles. But first, I got to talk to you all about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. And Prize Picks is both the easiest and most exciting way for you to now play daily fantasy sports because all you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and you can watch the winnings roll in. Do you think that Connor McDavid will get more than 0.5 goals in his next game? Or how about Austin Matthews, more than 1.5 points? You can now cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this hockey season when you and your crew run your game with Prize Picks. And one thing that I personally like about Prize Picks is that it's the only real daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups still stay in play even if someone gets injured. So be sure to go and download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $50 instantly when you play $5. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps with Prize Picks. Go and download the app to get $50 instantly when you play $5. Prize Picks, run your game. I don't know if you guys heard that in the background, but there are some interesting noises going on in the parking lot outside my building right now. Anyways, segment 3, the front end of the Blackhawks weekend back-to-back begins tomorrow when they take on the Los Angeles Kings with a 3 p.m. puck drop. Don't forget, not the standard 7:30 puck drop or 5 o'clock because we're on the West Coast. No, it's going to be a 3 p.m. afternoon matinee game against the Kings, who are off to a 6-3-2 start through their opening 11 games, but are winners of 3 of their last 4. They lost to San Jose on Tuesday. That was the Sharks' first win of the season. They've now rattled off 3 in a row to jump the Blackhawks in the standings, but then the Kings did bounce back when they returned home on Wednesday to defeat the Vegas Golden Knights 6-3. Quick rundown on the Los Angeles Kings, currently 13th in the NHL in goals per game, 16th in goals against, so a pretty balanced team as they usually are through their first 11 contests. 23rd on the penalty kill, so not the best on the man advantage. Hawks hopefully will have the advantage in that category, even though they lost on the man advantage and in the special teams department to San Jose last night, while the Kings are 19th on the penalty kill. 26th at the faceoff dot is noteworthy considering the Blackhawks also really struggle at the dot. So an opportunity going up against one of the other bottom dwellers in the NHL in terms of face-off win percentage. Looking at the Kings stats through their first 11, Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe, that is terrible of me. Adrian Kempe, Anze Kopitar are the only two forwards that the Kings have that have recorded more than 10 points this year. Kopitar's their leading scorer with 12. Kempe has 10. But how about Brandt Clark, the former high-round pick who's been down in the AHL these last couple of years, really bursting onto the big league scene here with 11 points in his first 10 games of the year. 1 goal, 10 assists. So certainly got to keep an eye on him every time that he touches the puck in the offensive zone. Kevin Fiala, 8 points as well. Ian Laferriere with 9 points respectively. Of course, notable that Drew Doughty will not be on the back end for Los Angeles in this one as he suffered a tough injury in the preseason, which has kind of led to some interesting discussions about how the NHL is going to handle their preseason moving forward. As far as what we can expect out of the Kings lineup, usually don't get to do this because when I record my preview episodes, it happens before the morning skate, but with neither of these teams being in action here on Friday night, NHL.com has put up a preview of both teams' projected lineups. The Blackhawks had practice in LA earlier on this afternoon and got a look at their forward lines as well. For the Kings, Alex Turcotte, the Island Lake, Illinois native, on the top line with Anze Kopitar and Andre Kempe, as I called him earlier. Probably want to take Alex Turcotte anytime point score just because I know how these things typically go for the Blackhawks. You probably also want to take the man centering their second line, that is Phillip Danault, who feels like one of the lost gems that the Blackhawks let fall out of their grasp along the way. But thank goodness we got Dale Weiss and Tomas Fleischmann, the meat man, really helped out the Blackhawks during those post-dynasty era runs. Phillip Danault centering the Kings' second line with Kevin Fiala and Trevor Moore. Third line for the Kings, Warren Foegele, Quentin Byfield, Ian Laferriere. That is definitely a trio the Blackhawks got to be keeping an eye on when they're out there on the ice. And then Akil Thomas. I cannot believe, I literally couldn't believe this, Blackhawks fans. I had to wipe my eyes when I loaded up the... How is Trevor Lewis still going? I'm not knocking the guy. I mean, it's incredible. Trevor Lewis. I remember this guy from when I was like 12 years old. He's still out there going strong, centering the fourth line for the Kings. Shout out Trevor Lewis, man. Oh my God. One of the biggest beauties in the league who's been playing forever, and I hope he continues to play forever. I legitimately could not believe my eyes when I saw that. He's centering the fourth line with Akil Thomas and Tanner Jeannot on the back end for the Kings. Mikey Anderson and Vladislav Gavrikov. I don't know why I'm having a tough times with names here on this Friday afternoon. Probably because I was up until 1 a.m. last night watching the Blackhawks lose to the San Jose Sharks. Vladislav Gavrikov and Mikey Anderson, brother of Joey Anderson, of course, serving as the top pairing for the Kings. Joel Edmondson and Brandt Clark, a little interesting tinker-tunker, I don't even know if that's the right word for it. Second pairing that they got going on for LA. And then Blackhawks legend Andreas Englund. I don't know what's happened to me right now. Andreas Englund on the third pairing, skating with Jordan Spence. Fellow Blackhawks legend Caleb Jones has appeared in 4 of the first 11 games this year for LA. Looks like he's going to serve as the 7th defenseman, though. And then Darcy Kemper figures to get the start for them. He's 3-0-2 through 5 appearances with a 3.16 goals against, an .895 save percentage. So not the finest of starts for Darcy Kemper. Blackhawks should make sure they fire the puck on net. I thought they kind of got a little too cute at times last night in San Jose. For the Blackhawks lineup, looks like it's going to be Philip Kurashev and Connor Bedard still on the top line. However, it's not going to be Teuvo Teravainen as he's been held without a point for 6 consecutive games. Looks like Luke Richardson is going to be mixing things up. It's actually team-leading goal scorer Ryan Donato getting the bump up to the top line. And I really don't hate this, Blackhawks fans, not only because Donato has now scored in 3 consecutive games and he leads the team in goals, but one thing that seems really apparent, I think why the Bedard, Teravainen, Foligno trio were working really well is because Foligno was the one who was going and doing the dirty work, winning the loose pucks, the board battles. That's a struggle for Connor Bedard and Teuvo Teravainen, two undersized skill forwards. And I think that's part of why when Lucas Reichel has gone up to that top line, they haven't really found a lot of success. And with Philip Kurashev there to round things out. Those are three pretty undersized forwards who play a skill game and don't have a lot of sandpaper to them. Ryan Donato can play that style, and also he has played with Connor Bedard in the past in a very short stint, but he's been up on the top line. He was there a couple of times throughout the course of last year for a few games, so he's not too unfamiliar with it, and he's not an offensive-minded player, right? But he at least has a somewhat competent skill set. Not as good as probably Nick Foligno's, but honestly, at his age, Donato might be better suited for that line. Someone who can go in there and win the puck battles, go into the dirty areas, retrieve loose pucks to get 86 and 23 opportunities to connect with one another. So I don't hate Ryan Donato getting that opportunity whatsoever. And quite honestly, if that doesn't go well, I think it's time to get Tyler Bertuzzi up on that top line. For now, Bertuzzi looks like he's going to stay on the second line with Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno, as in their second game together as a trio, they actually did a lot of good work. Analytically, they were the Blackhawks' most effective trio, a lot of good scoring chances. Hall picked up an assist. Bertuzzi found the back of the net for his first even strength goal and point of the year. So don't hate that trio sticking together. But again, if things don't get going for Connor Bedard on the top line, I think you got to get Tyler Bertuzzi up there at some point. Looks like the third line is going to be Ilya Mikheyev, Jason Dickinson, and Teuvo Teravainen appears to be swapping spots with Ryan Donato. I feel like Luke Richardson might want to get Joey Anderson in there to play against his brother. However, there's really no one to replace on that third line, and there's really no one to replace on the fourth line, as Pat Maroon, Lucas Reichel, and Craig Smith continue to do a lot of good work with one another. So I'm going to guess Joey Anderson and Andreas Athanasiou wind up being healthy scratched once again. Wyatt Kaiser and Seth Jones figure to be the top pairing. Alex Vlasic and Connor Murphy, as I referenced earlier. Really strong night last night in San Jose. Murphy's been playing much better. I just don't like that combination because that leaves Nolan Allen, a 21-year-old rookie, left babysitting TJ Brody, who actually, despite giving Will Smith way too much room on the opening goal of the game, had one of his better performances so far this season, but at the same time, that's really not saying all that much. So that's only my concern with Allen being on the third line with Brody. Blackhawks really need Alec Martinez back. I figure Peter Mrazek is going to get the start, the sixth consecutive start for him in between the pipes, but I wouldn't be stunned if Arvid Soderblom makes his third start of the year. I just feel like a more ideal situation for the Hawks, really needing this one against LA after losing in San Jose, is that Peter Mrazek goes once again, and they hope he bounces back. And last night, it wasn't just him showing signs of fatigue. I feel it's more likely that Mrazek starts the front end, and that lets Soderblom go in Anaheim on Sunday night. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if the Blackhawks go the other way around just because they don't want to absolutely exhaust Peter Mrazek this early on in the season. All right, that is going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. To everyone out there who joined in, thank you all again for tuning into the show. Be sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already, and to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way, you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me on X at Jack Bushman2, but be sure to go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. So until the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your weekends. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.